freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lynn Shelley. Today's guest has been in the Army for over 30 years and has served under all the components in the Army, starting his career in the reserves, going active duty, and then moving to the National Guard. He has held 5 job specialties and is in an Airborne unit. He has many awards, including a Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation Medals, and Army Achievement Medals. Here's the interview with Jason Myers. Why did you join the military and how old were you?
Well, I was 17, almost 18 years old when I joined in September of 1987. And the reason that I looked towards the military is because I came from, a generation that looked at their grandfathers and their uncles that served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. And I guess I just had a propensity to serve. For me, it wasn't personally about college money. It wasn't about those types of benefits. It was just I wanted to wear the uniform because I'd seen pictures of my grandfathers and uncles in uniform.
Continuing the legacy.
Yeah, continuing the legacy. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you deploy?
I did. I was deployed with the 101st Airborne Division. I was active duty at the time for the first Gulf War. I had been in the reserves from the time of 17 until about the first part of December of 1990. And I decided to go, I just got married for the first time. I decided to join the military full time, not realizing that as soon as I got to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, that I was going to be going right over the pond to the desert. And so, I showed up, and about 3 weeks later, I was overseas, basically as a replacement going in.
Wow. So you were reserves,
mm-hmm.
and then you switched to active duty and almost immediately deployed.
Right, because most of the division was already over there. So I just went and fell into place where they needed me to be and started doing stuff. And I actually flew in, was flying over Italy from Germany at the time the air war started. And they had to turn our aircraft around and send us back to Germany because they didn't know what kind of air superiority they were going to have. And so we sat on the tarmac for about a day and a half in Germany, and then flew into country in Saudi Arabia.
So how was that experience for you?
It was uncomfortable, just flying on a C5 for that many hours. That's what I remember most about it, was being uncomfortable. I might have been a little bit nervous when I found out we were turning around because the air war had started, the air campaign had started, and basically Desert Storm was on its way. I think just being in country and being busy all the time was, I don't know that I really thought about it being super spooky. There were times, because I was a transportation operator, so a truck driver, and they're kind of one of those targets that if you don't have air superiority, you kind of get hit. You can get hit from aircraft and stuff. And so there was that thought. And we knew that Saddam Hussein had used chemical agents on his own people, and it was a big fear for those of us who were over there that he would use something on us too. And so those were the kind of the most frightening, experiences that I had.
How did you deal with the stress?
Oh, I was pretty religious at the time, so I would read scriptures and pray and do things like that to kind of calm myself at that moment.
Rely on your religion?
Yeah, rely on my religion, my upbringing and stuff, yeah.
You were in the military during September 11th then?
I was in the National Guard at the time.
You were reserve, and then you went active duty, and then you were in Guard?
Yes.
And so when you were in the Guard, was that as a traditional Guardsman?
Yes, it was at the time.
Okay. And when September 11 happened while in the military, what was that experience like?
It was very real. You realize that your country's under attack, and you realize that you wear the uniform, you're expected to be one of those who goes forward and does what the country calls you to do. So it was pretty surreal and a little spooky. I mean, I by that time I'd had 3 children with my first wife, and my youngest was had just turned 2. So there was that fear of leaving family behind. And then we'd show up to drill the next whenever it was, following the attacks, and of course you get guys that are motivated and excited, want to serve, want to do what they've trained to do. I was in the field artillery at the time on 198 howitzers, which are towed howitzers, and so we went from scared to excited to wanting to go over, just waiting for the call, being excited for the call, because you train and train and train and train, and then you get the chance to go and serve, and you want to do it. So,
did you deploy after September 11th as well?
Yes. The unit that I was assigned to, which was the 1st of the 145th Field Artillery Battalion, and I was in Charlie Battery down in Spanish Fork, Utah. We deployed for Operation Noble Eagle mission, which was just across the mountain range over in the Tooele Valley at the Deseret Chemical Depot.
Uh-huh.
And we were down there to basically guard the depot from anybody getting in, because at the chemical depot they were in the process of getting rid of all the chemical weapons because of the treaty between Russia and the United States, and they didn't have a lot there, but they still had a stockpile of chemicals that they were going through to get rid of. And so we basically set up a perimeter. We'd have shifts between the different batteries in the battalion, like 3 days on, 3 days off type stuff, and we just watch the perimeter, drive the perimeter, just be extra guards to make sure that nobody came in.
So you deployed to Tooele?
Yeah, it was just a stateside deployment. It was not an overseas. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Were there any big surprises to you once you joined the military, or do you feel like with the military background that you had that it was about what you expected?
Well, I think my biggest surprise was the cultural differences between the people that you would interact with. Like when I first went to basic training. Being from Utah my entire life, it's a pretty close community,
mm-hmm.
And you think everybody's the same as you, and then you get out to something like that and realize that they're different. People believe different things. People look different. People act differently. People, some people respect you, some people don't. So it was kind of a culture shock. That was probably my biggest surprise. I'd seen movies about what basic training might look like,
right?
Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, things
yes.
like that, and so you had an idea that you were going to yell at all the time, as you went through this experience. But I found that despite my reservations about whether I thought I could do it, that each day it tended to get more and more tolerable, and then thus became easier to kind of get through the process of going through the training and stuff. And that carried over even into the active duty side. I came back to Utah for a while, and then when I went active duty, you'd see the same cultural differences in people and have to deal with people's personalities from different areas and values and lack of values. And so it kind of progressed, learning to cope with those differences in people.
Right.
Which I think was probably one of the biggest things that the military has taught me, is that you can be around people you might not like to be around, but you can learn to work with them to accomplish a mission.
Right.
Yeah.
Learning to work well with anybody.
Right, yeah.
As someone who has experienced all of the different components of the Army, what are your thoughts on the different components?
Each have a very important mission. The active Army is obviously our first warfighting, component that's going to go out and take care of the country's business overseas. The op tempo or operational tempo in the active Army is a lot different than you find in the Guard and the Reserves, because they have to be ready all the time to go. The National Guard, obviously, its mission is to, for the homeland defense, to be here to help in natural disasters, emergencies, and things like that. And then also in this last round of war fighting that we've had since 9/11, they've become really the force that the regular Army looks at to fill vacancies and needs that they have. And so if you look at all the different deployments that have gone on with the National Guard, we've really picked up the torch, and people have gone out and done some amazing things. And the reserves is it was a good experience. Sorry, reservists, I'm not a big fan of the reserves.
Why is that?
I think that their higher headquarters is so separated from most of their units that they just don't seem to get the support that they need. I don't know, I just never felt like I was getting what I needed from, higher. So that was just my experience. That was in the early 90s. I haven't been in the reserve since. I've really enjoyed the National Guard here in Utah because we've had some great leadership through my career that I've worked with and worked for. They've always been good about getting us the resources we need to train, to go to school, to travel to different areas and do different missions with other countries. And it's been a great experience for me.
At what point in your career did you become part of an airborne unit?
Oh man, that was late. It was something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to jump out of a plane, which is crazy, but I always wanted to. It just seemed really cool to me. And I was 39 years old when I went to Airborne school,
Wow.
to jump school. So I was a little bit older, and I wasn't the oldest in the class. I think we had a naval commander that was, he was probably in his early 50s at the time.
Wow.
So I wasn't the oldest, but I felt like I was. Yeah, I just always wanted to do it. I was grateful for the chance to get it. It was probably, you asked how far in my career it was. It was almost 10 years ago, so I was a good 20 years into my career at the time, a little over 20 years.
Did you have to position yourself to work into that spot?
The National Guard here in Utah was standing up a special operations support company, and I interviewed for a full-time position with them after I left Utah State ROTC, and I just was lucky enough to get the position to help stand that unit up as the readiness NCO. I was an E7 at the time, so Sergeant First Class.
And how did you like being airborne?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. My knees hated it, my back hated it, but I loved it. It was fun. It was a lot of work. I used to hide in our Army patrol caps. We've got a little flap in the top, and I used to take ibuprofen and Tylenol and wrap them in a little plastic bag and stuff them way down inside of there because you weren't supposed to have that stuff there. So when I'd get hurt, and I'd go sneak away and grab a couple, pills and take them to help my knees and my back out. And after the first week, it's a lot of running, it's a lot of pounding your body, and I had to go get a massage at the base exchange, the PX, to get through that next week. But it got easier. It became less of a physical challenge and more of a mental challenge when you have to kind of get yourself to go out the door. But I was really amazed my first jump that I was kind of in the middle of the stick, and as soon as the guy in front of me went going, it was just like that training just kicked right in. I didn't even think about it. I just passed off my static line to the jump master, looked out the door, and just went. The second time was scarier because I thought about it. I knew what I'd gone through.
You thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
So then as time went on, what became your tactic for dealing with that on a mental preparation
With jumping?
side? Yes.
Oh, well, jumping is one of those things that if you're fortunate enough, you do it enough to where it just becomes second nature. You don't really think about it. You go through pre-jump training before each jump. You kind of go through the process of, they'll have mock-ups of the aircraft, and you'll hook up a static line, just a random static line. It's not hooked to anything, but you just hook it up and you walk out the door with it in your hand and hand it off and turn and jump and practiced your PLFs, parachute landing. So, the more training you do, the more natural it becomes, the less you think about it, the more confidence you gain in your equipment and the rigors that pack your chutes and stuff like that. And so I just think that And it's probably that way, you know, in any military occupation or anything you do, you just practice, you practice, you practice. I remember doing the same thing in the field artillery. We'd go out in the motor pool and just do dry gunnery drills, you know, or we just go through the process of changing the lay of the gun and the azimuth and everything and deflection, and we'd just go through it dry, and it became second nature. So when we were out on the live fires, it ran really, really smooth.
It's second nature.
It's second nature, and I think that, you know, even your special forces teams, they go through so many drills before they go on to a mission that it's just all second nature to them.
The mental preparation, it was just the second jump that was the hardest, and after that you just...
After that it wasn't so bad. Yeah, the second one was the worst, and I think a lot of people that have gone to jump school probably say the same thing.
After you know what to expect.
Yeah, after you know what to expect, yeah.
What do you consider your greatest military accomplishment, and why?
You know, I think making it 31 years in the military is a pretty big accomplishment.
It's incredible, absolutely.
And like I said before we were talking tonight, that when I went through basic training in AIT or tech school, I didn't think that this was something that I was going to do as a career full-time as long as I have. I thought it would be an 8-year stint, you know, do my time in the Guard or the reserves, get out, go on with my life. And it just became kind of part of who I was. And, you know, in fact, I had a 7-month break of service between the reserves and the National Guard because, let me go back, because when I got off active duty, I had about 10 months left on my contract. So instead of going to the IRR, I just finished up in the reserves. Figured I might as well get a little bit of a paycheck. Then I got out completely for 7 months, and then the National Guard came knocking on my door because I missed the camaraderie, you know, and those of you and those of us who have served kind of know what that is.
Yes.
And it's something that's really unique.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, going back to your original question, I think that really the 30-year career is probably my greatest accomplishment. I've done a lot of things that have made that 30 years really, really fun and really, really adventurous, but I got to sum it up to that big 30 plus years of service. After
30 years, what do you think was the most important skill that you had in navigating Army life?
Patience and perseverance. Those of us who are in the Army know the phrase, and maybe in the other branches, it's there too, is the phrase, hurry up and wait.
Yep.
You know?
I know that one for sure.
You have to learn a lot of patience in the military. Things don't go according to your plan or schedule. You're reliant on other people to kind of tell you when and where to be there and what your mission is and what you need to do. So I think you just have to be really, really patient. And you have to learn perseverance, because there's going to become situations that are just really weird and abnormal, and you've got to dig deep to understand that no matter what, the mission's what matters most. It comes first, and you just have to persevere through any challenges. And you can look back in history and stories of, you know, different battles and things that soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors went through that really required perseverance and to challenge themselves to keep moving forward and fight.
Are there any habits that you've learned from the military that stick with you?
I think you spend this much time doing doing the things I've done. You learn how to be dedicated to your profession, you know, and doing the job that you're expected to do. Working hard, making sure that you do your part of the big piece, you know, that the military is, your unit is. And I think a great habit that I've learned is probably, you know, physical fitness has always been important to me. I'm not as great at it now as I used to be, because I'm retiring in 6 months, but I still believe in exercising and trying to stay fit, look the best I can, be the best I can, because in the military especially, you know, physical fitness is really, really important. Physical and mental fitness is really, really important. That's probably one of the big habits that I've learned. And like I said before, doing what I was expected to do, what my job, what my mission is accomplishing that.
What drove you, or what was important to you in completing the job that you were supposed to do?
I think that you gain a sense of self-accomplishment in doing what you're supposed to do. You know that somebody somewhere in your unit, within your higher command, is expecting you to give the best product that you can, give all that you can to whatever that is. And so I think that's probably one of the things that drove me. And I don't like failing. I've done plenty of it, but I don't like it. And so, if I've made a mistake, I'm always trying to make sure that I don't do that one again, and use those experiences to do a better job at anything else that I'm doing.
It sounds like it was really important to you to do your best to support the team, right, so that everybody knew that they could rely on you.
Right. Yeah, it really is. And you always hear, you've got your guy to your left and your right in the foxhole, and you got to do what you can to protect them, and you got to trust them to do what they need to do to protect you. And that goes for combat, that goes for office work.
Yes. That
goes for in between drills when you're trying to prepare, a training event for your unit, to make sure they're not coming and wasting their time. So yeah, I mean, you just want to make sure that you're doing that part to make the big wheel kind of go.
Are there any people that were influential to you in your career?
As I thought about this question, my peers throughout my career, those were on the same level as me, the guys that I kind of were in the quote unquote foxhole with doing, those were the guys that probably influenced me more than anybody. I've had some great leaders, both officers and enlisted leadership, and they've done some great things and taught me some great things, but I think it's really been the guy at the left and the right of me throughout my career that has probably influenced me the most, and given me motivation to do a good job.
Are there any books that have been influential to you through your life or your career?
I'm not a big reader.
No?
I'll admit to it. It's probably one of my weaknesses as an senior NCO, was that I haven't read a lot of professional books. Really haven't read any professional books. I'm just not a reader. I'm a visual person. I watch a lot of History Channel. I watch a lot of documentaries. I like to learn.
Are there any documentaries that have been impactful to you?
Oh, I don't know if I can name any particular, but I watch a lot of history. Military history fascinates me. I mean, anytime I stop and I see some kind of a Napoleonic battle, or Civil War, Revolutionary War, any of the current last century wars, I just get fascinated with watching and learning from it, to see situations and what happened and how people persevered and how people stepped up and became above normal to save a situation. So I don't know if I can really name one. I just really enjoy history, and that's kind of how I study history, is through these sources of media.
Are there any historical figures that you find particularly inspiring?
Yeah, I think it's the 20th Maine at Gettysburg. I haven't thought about this for a long time. I think it was Chamberlain was the colonel. Just if you're familiar with that story, how he was set on the far, I think it was the left flank of the Union lines at Little Round Top, and how he was able to conceptualize a way to defend that position. He knew that the rebel forces were coming. He could hear them. He knew that it was happening, and how he, just what he did to make that fish hook and lead from the front and defend the line. Because if that had fallen, as any historian or history buff would know, that whole battle would have changed. The whole outcome of the Civil War could have changed, because they would have been able to sweep down the Union lines all the way to Cemetery Hill, really change the course of history. So I really admire him for what he did. He led 3 charges down the hill after, kind of stopped the initial flank, because they were kept coming and coming, and it's pretty impressive. So I've always liked him.
If you could give the new enlistees one superpower or skill set to help them in their career and the future of the military, what would it be?
Mental strength. I think that you really have to learn how to be mentally strong, because it'll be just, as I've talked about before, there's lots of challenges that are going to come. They're going to require a lot of mental strength. I've seen, young soldiers struggle. I struggled as a young soldier with situations that I didn't like, that type of perseverance, and being able to overcome those things come with age, experience, and maturity. But I think if you can be mentally strong and understand that there's a bigger purpose than you can see in what you're doing and what needs to be done, that it'll make it easier to kind of get through those situations that you're placed in.
If you could go back to yourself as a new enlisting member, what advice would you give yourself?
Take it all serious. I've always felt unprepared in my jobs and the different things that I've done. I think you really got to study, take time to do professional development, whether it's resident schools or correspondence schools, reading professional books, which I told you I don't do, haven't done. I've never gotten the habit of it. I think you just need to prepare yourself through studying, learning. Lean on the senior guys in your squad, wing, platoon, whatever. To kind of lean on them, to learn from them. They can teach you a lot. When I was teaching ROTC up at Utah State, that was one of the things I told these cadets, is that you guys are going to be officers, new lieutenants. You're going to be over these sergeant first classes, but they've got 15 to 16, 18 years under their belt. You need to lean on them to learn from them, because they're your greatest encyclopedia on how to be an officer, is by learning from them. Hopefully it worked.
Hopefully they listened.
Hopefully they listened. I think
that's great advice.
Yeah, I think most of those that I stay in contact with still have done pretty good in their careers, and hopefully some of what I did, I don't expect it's all me, but some of what I did rubbed off on them. I was pretty ornery cuss back then. I'm much more mellow now.
What do you want to see for them?
For these new recruits? Or for the officers?
The ones that you trained?
Oh, I want them to have the military be everything that they want it to be. I can't speak for being an officer. I've never been one. I've had great relationships with the officers throughout my career. But yeah, I just hope that the military is everything that they want it to be for them, whether it's personal growth, professional growth, providing for their family. That's basically it.
How do you respond when people thank you for your service?
Oh, the first thing I do is thank them and tell them they're welcome, and just thank them for their support. When I went off to the Gulf War, I spoke in front of my church congregation, and having known what happened to the Vietnam vets and the sacrifice they made and the way that the country treated them, I asked those in the congregation to please support the troops, understand that they're doing a job that they were asked to do, and treat them with respect. So gratitude is one of the things that I try to express to people that thank me. It feels awkward, which I think to most people that wear the uniform, it feels kind of awkward because we're just doing our job. I mean,
right.
Our citizens pay us to train and learn and fight and die. For me, it's always kind of weird, but I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really appreciate you being willing to be on the podcast and to talk about your experiences in the Army.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. I liked when Jason talked about how mental preparation came because the more training you do, the more natural it becomes. My challenge to you is, if you find yourself struggling with a task, look for some ways you can practice it or a piece of it until it becomes second nature. If you would like to read more about Jason, please visit tamfpodcast.com/JUMP. And if you would like to share something you learned or to make suggestions for future episodes, please visit the Tap and Move Forward website or social media sites.